First of all, thank you. I found this series that was being done elsewhere on YouTube where people were just connecting with um, others and chatting in this sort of virtual meetup and sharing it with others because I think right now, especially right now, like there's just a lot of lack of social interaction. I've realized in my own situation, like I would connect with you once or twice a year at conferences. That's a time where I get to catch up with you, hear what's going on, like we get to share in some sort of passionate talk and even sort things out too. Like when we first connected, right at Calaba, after I started the Daily BA, you were like, "How's that working for you?" And like we had a really good talk for a long time about what was going on there. So I guess this series has been somewhat, admittedly, selfish on getting to catch up with people, but also um, when I saw it modeled by other creators out there, it was something that was made me feel like I was kind of like a third party listening to conversation across a couple of colleagues. So I'm hoping that's what we can do for others too, um, at least. So thank you. And I've literally just been asking people like, how are you doing? What's going on in your part of the world with the complete chaos that this year's been? What have you been doing the last 5 months?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you wanting to catch up. And like you said, um, it used to happen at conferences, and I miss that. Generally, pre-COVID, I would go to maybe 5 or 6 conferences a year, and I always look forward to catching up with people like you. Um, and but also I think in general, when the conversations I've had with you, they always have been very very meaningful. We do talk, yes, we're very passionate about what we do, and it's not very hard for us to get engaged in conversations about
Yeah.
those topics. But honestly, when you asked me to be on the channel, I had some pause because
Yeah.
I'm not used to being in the spotlight like this, and it makes me a little bit nervous. But I got excited about the opportunity to not only catch up with you, but to thank you because I have been someone who has learned so much from the content that you have put out there. Um, I mean, and you trace our history back to Calaba, but I actually met
It was
you
before
a
that.
little bit before then. Yeah, we met at one of the conferences you host, the Next Gen
Hmm.
Revolution. That's the name of it? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
and
was
yeah,
sorry, I didn't want to neglect that. I remember
yeah,
that because I was
yeah.
speaking more in the context of the Daily BA channel, but yeah, it goes
Yeah,
back before then too.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I don't mean to correct you, but I think that has like I guess historical relevance to
Yeah.
me
I
because
should have
it
pointed it
was
out. I appreciate that.
no, I
Yeah.
mean, and Calaba was important because I think as it relates to the daily VA, I remember having kind of an honest conversation with you, and I had the chance to be supportive in moments where you were just getting started, and maybe there was it was overwhelming for you.
For sure. Yeah.
So I was happy to offer that support and tell you that what you were doing was not only innovative, but it was going to really have an impact on the field. So I'm happy to see
I
this
appreciate that.
evolution that your platforms have had over
Yeah.
the years. But then, when I met you, maybe it was a year earlier in Miami, you also, as usual, very generous with your time. But as someone who has been networking with people in the field, you connected me with people that I ended up collaborating with and learning a lot from. Like, for example, one person that comes to mind is Annie Escalante,
Yeah. Yeah.
who at the time was one of the board members of the Dissemination of Behavior Analysis Special Interest Group at ABAI. And we connected immediately and had more conversations and again shared shared passions. And ultimately, because of those interactions and conversations, I ended up being part of this board and as an interim vice chair, and then collaborated with them for another term. Uh, and in doing so, met some wonderful people who were also passionate about dissemination, and we did our small contributions to trying to do some
Yeah.
within the field dissemination, and then also outside of the field, which we know a lot of us struggle with. That there's no roadmap or guidelines or task
Yeah.
analysis when it comes to dissemination. Is hard, and as a field, we need to work on that. And some people are, uh, already paving the way, but there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work to be done.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, that's just one example of many things I am very grateful for, and seeing that evolution all the way to, not only all of the content of the daily BA, but then the controversial exchange is
Yeah.
also a very nice, a very interesting platform where it is, yes, provocative and disruptive, but in a way eye-opening, and
Yeah.
just so much great information comes from there. And what you did with Team on Location and this way of thinking, who has that has touched so many people. And I'm, as someone who works in crisis management and behavior analysis, I follow very closely what Greg Hanley and his team are working on, because if you're in the field of crisis management and working with severe problem behavior, you better have those competencies to both assess and treat problem behavior, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that you don't rely on the reactive strategies, you don't rely on the physical restraints or any other emergency procedures
Yeah.
so much. And so your collaboration with him is just going to put that into in a very accessible way, into behavior analyst repertoires. And
Yeah.
that's great, and so that, and for so many reasons, just the way you put yourself out there and engage in conversation, how introspective you are in this process, and seeing you evolve has been something that I have been very excited to see. So anyway, right back at you.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. It's
Well,
just thank
I've
you for
got a
having me.
I've got a few things that come off to mind of that. I think four. Let's see if I can remember them all. So first of all, one of
Okay.
the most important. Thank you for the kind words. Like the side that people don't see is that the 10 hours a day of editing and working in a editing bay by yourself. There's a lot of cool stuff that ends up on the channel, but there is a lot of the process that it takes to be able to put that sort of stuff out there. And so these sort of comments like stoke the fire, fuel the fire, right? Keep me going. But if anyone's kind of new watching here, there's a few things. First of all, I distinctly remember, and it was about that time when we were talking to Calabo, I was starting to run into this. I didn't realize in the moment. You helped me frame some of this, but also it became more clear over that summer, was the channel will be as good as I can get others involved, basically. Like the idea was like just start creating videos about behavior analysis. The most consistent variable I have to be able to create a video is myself, obviously, because like I'm always around. But I realized really quickly I'd run out of content and run out of ideas. So like that's where I think you helped me kind of start to slowly frame that and realize that. But I just want to share out there, like the channel works to the extent that I can figure out how to collaborate and work with others, right? And that's been really apparent. Especially right now with what's going on, like I often feel like I'm not uploading things at the frequency that I should or want to. And it's like, I'm not going to just upload something of me again. Like, you know what I mean? Like what value does this have? Like right now. And video is such a personal, interactive, like one-on-one medium where you have the camera and you're film, like you're with people, right? To like make it interesting, that it's been tricky to
Yeah.
figure out like what to make, I guess. But then there's two others. So hold on just a sec. I remember the one I want to end with. Oh, you had mentioned how you connected with Annie Escalante. one of the coolest byproducts of this experience so far has been things like that. Like I've had in the past week, I had somebody that hired somebody that was an RBT they reported. And they were like, you know, what do you know about behavior analysis? Because they're interested in sports and working in a sports setting. And they're like, my understanding was pretty much nothing, but I do follow this channel on YouTube and it's the Daily BA. And the guy's like, what? like you're interested in sports? You found this channel? So it's like those little things, right? Like how you're talking about Annie Escalante or that, where I've had a couple people that were like, yo, like I hired someone because they found your video of what we did and they resonated with my values that I put into that video. Like that's the coolest shit ever that comes from these things. And like, you never know when they're going to happen. They might happen pretty infrequently, but like, it's so cool to like see those sort of things happen, and it's super rewarding, right? Because like this very video, man, like you never know what it might turn into and lead to, right? Like it might really help somebody out or like lead to something like that. So in a way, it's like what I'm trying to get at is like without people like you and this interaction we're having right now, none of this works. And so like I've got to thank you back on not only the personal stuff, but like this medium of like interacting and talking with people is much more interesting. And it's what I think I like to put out on the channel, right? Of like sharing other perspectives out there. And then the other was kind of a side note off of this, which was I do want to share on the channel. I've been figuring these sort of things out here. So I tried to formally push the Controversial Exchange onto its own platform and its own thing and to kind of live and breathe there for a number of reasons. I think it'd be interesting to create more generally approachable content on this channel over time on the Daily BA, and then put things that are more nuanced discussions and like the nitty gritty over there on that channel. But also you'd brought up the kind of controversial nature of it, right? Being built into there. Part of that was I wanted to try to have those conversations, figure out how to have them and make them productive, which has been a learning lesson in and of itself. But also the name itself has become a bit of a barrier to the goal of what we want to achieve there. And so we haven't set a name yet. I can tell you afterwards because we have set a name, but I just don't want anybody like snag domains and stuff like that, right? Under me. But we've set up a plan for like shifting that to try to have similar types of conversations, but in a bit of a broader context with other fields involved, with the core still being a behavioral focus and behavioral lens, but not like limit ourselves because of the name per se. Kind of like a, I don't know, like a phase change line, right? On kind of the next steps of this thing. So that's something that's coming to that channel pretty soon. We want to call it something else and kind of take what we've learned and I think put it into a, I don't know if it's more adult, a more mature, like what we want to start making out of it. So
Yeah,
so yeah, man,
I can
I
see
appreciate
that.
it. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I can see that. I can see that by the name of it, that people can come in with presumptions and maybe somewhat defensive
yeah,
or kind of just like, it's not just about noticing the controversy, but like what can you learn
yeah, and that's
about
it.
those things, and how can you have a radical understanding of it, like how
A
can
radical
you
in the Skinnerian sense of
in the Skinner sense,
thorough
yeah,
and
yeah,
full, not radical as everyone knows it. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, yeah,
it's kind of like a branding 101 kind of like lesson that
yeah.
I thought maybe we could leverage and run with, but it was one of those things in hindsight. It's like, let's change the name up and see if we can kind of like achieve some of the goals that we were looking to achieve and not have some of those assumptions come in there. That in fact that was one of the managing lessons that I learned
Hmm.
later in my career that was the most impactful. Was a CEO totally outside of the field. It was like you've got to start to learn how to manage perceptions, not like assume that the model, even if it's built correctly, will handle that. It's about
Hmm.
the human behavior of what people are coming in with, right? So like if you're like, oh, a person can enter into this and come out with the right thing, not always. Like not if there's assumptions, right, that are made on something like the name of a podcast before they click
Hmm.
in, right? So
Hmm.
anyhow, it's been this I feel like every time I talk with you, you're almost like my like content psychologist in a sense of like helping me like, you know what I mean, like work through some of these things. But yeah, man, like we've been really thinking about TCE and like the name, and then also I don't know, It's something that if you're not introspective on what's going on and paying attention, I feel like you're stagnant and like not learning and developing. So it's
Hmm.
uh it's a scary
Well,
place if you're not doing that.
if you by now, like with the content that you have put out with that podcast, if you by now have spent the time listening to the episodes, then the title of the podcast doesn't matter so much anymore, because then you see the value in the information that you get, and the
Yeah,
variety of forms in which you're doing things, like for example the Skinner's talk or Sidman's
those were
talk,
so
and
fun,
how
man.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, how you unpack that. So much fun and so informative at the same way, while being also putting in context the history, and when,
Yeah.
when it happened and how that matters in the history of our field. So anyway, man, like just keep it up, because I mean, at least I am enjoying it, and I will continue
Yeah.
to follow it.
Appreciate it. Let me give the chance for maybe some other shout outs too. It's like what else are you seeing out there that you're stoked about? Could be in the field or outside of the field. Like what are things you're kind of paying attention to and
Okay, well, man, there's so much I can say when it comes to that, because while we have been in, kind of struggling and adapting with this pandemic for only like what 4 or 5 months.
yeah.
It feels like it has been forever, and I've gone through many phases, and I think a lot of us in the field went through a stage where, oh man, like so many CEUs opened up for free, or maybe I get to catch up on these
Mm-hmm.
articles in this book, and maybe it now is the time for us to catch up with all the things we had in the back burner, as it relates to like professional development and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. Um, so I did have that phase, and I did a lot of CUs, even though I don't really need them.
Yeah.
It was truly for the info, for the knowledge. And I don't know, man, like so many things, like from some of the stuff that FTF consultants put out,
Yeah.
because of the nature of my work,
Mm-hmm.
and just I really enjoy what they're doing, what their innovations, and the refinement of their technologies
Yeah.
in treating and assessing problem behavior. Uh, did some trainings kind of on precision teaching, because it's another thing that I wanted to learn. It's one of the things that make me feel somewhat inadequate as a behavior
Yeah,
analyst
yeah.
of now almost like over 10 years that
Yeah.
I'm not fluent, and pun intended, when it
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
to
yeah,
precision
yeah.
teaching and using the standard acceleration chart. And so I have the basics, but it's not something I'm not charting the things, the
Yeah.
things that I'm not tracking my own behavior, I guess, with the chart, and
Yeah.
or maybe using it in practice. And I would want to be fluent, and maybe in that connection with dissemination, figuring out maybe with the community why it is so difficult to uh, be embraced by the entirety of the field, why it's not in the task list, those sort of things. Like they
Mm-hmm.
interest me, because certainly there is value in their measuring systems,
Yeah.
and their graphics. So why are we not all of us? Why are we not trained? Why wasn't it in my history? Why is it that after 10 years of working in the field, I'm
Yeah.
still not contacting that? And
Yeah.
so things like that. So I'm doing a little bit better with that, but still not fluent. um, and then a lot of catching up with the sort of stuff that you do, so the podcast
Yeah.
and so I have been
Dude,
listening to some, yeah, to
I was
some
gonna say
audiobooks. Yeah, sorry.
oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say the number of podcasts that have popped up just in behavior
Yeah,
analysis. Like, there's a number of things going out there. I think that's another byproduct we've seen, which I like
yeah,
most of what's coming on too. I know there's some split on this with some of the creator community of like people are like, oh,
yeah,
like I do podcasts. Like, why do we need more stuff that looks the same?
yeah,
Um, but competition breeds quality usually.
Yeah.
But also, there's so many areas that are being missed right now, so it's pretty cool to see new stuff popping online. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've even seen this one. I'll make sure to link some of the stuff down below. But there was a behavior analyst in Ireland, I believe, that made the behavioral vaccine. Was I think the name of the podcast? I listened to it, behavioral vaccine. But it was just a behavior analytic view of what's going on amidst everything the last five months.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
like there's I guess shout out to anybody that's making things out there during this time too, because
Yeah.
there's as a field a lot of um, gaps, and like there's only so much
Yeah.
time, right, to make something. So more people making things is only going to help us out, I think. So it's a pretty exciting
Yeah.
time in that sense.
So I just learned maybe 2 or 3 days ago about that there's a new podcast that was just created by someone who used to be in that DBA SIG with me. Her name is Ashley Fiorilli, and
Okay.
it's along the lines of mindfulness, self care. Some of the things that I think are very fascinating too, but some people now are spending the time to putting it within our conceptual framework, so it's more digestible for us
Yeah.
behavior analysts. But so important. So so much social validity in kind of helping just like people all over the world. Anyone who engages in behavior, you
Yeah.
suffer, you struggle because of those behaviors, sometimes because of the verbal behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
so some of what these practices do is that they effectively help you still with a functional approach, but leaving some room for some of those constructs that were not originally used by us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So people gravitating towards anxiety, and mindfulness, and so the things that are like, for example, um, in the technologies of acceptance and commitment training or
Yeah.
therapy. Again, like some people kind of resist it because sometimes you have construct after construct after construct, and so it's hard for you if you're more of a purist to see the parsimony there,
Yeah.
and the elegance of the writings for you to track it in those units of analysis and such. But anyway, I don't. I'm not that person. I'm very interested in that, and in fact, some of those stages I was talking to you about during this pandemic, in my kind of obsession to make the time count. So one of the things I was doing is like I was walking every day, like, and walking only. I wasn't like I'm out of shape. So in trying to get in shape, I started in the shaping process to just
Yeah.
walk around my neighborhood, and I would do like a 5K, which would take me 2 hours if I was just walking. But
Mm-hmm.
that means 2 hours of audiobooks and two
Yeah.
hours of podcasts, behavioral and not. And then and another thing that I have been doing pretty consistently is meditating once daily at least.
Okay.
And I use this app called Calm, and I find it that it does the job. It does, um, and this is not a behavior analytic account of it, but I do
Yeah.
feel like I reset. I feel that that there is this observation of your covert and overt verbal behavior, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to see those things while also kind of just letting it just produce itself without resisting it. And I like how I feel also physiologically, because I do feel this readiness to start the day after my coffee and morning meditation. um, and what I'm very interested in is like would meditation help me de-escalate in those days where I'm a little bit pissed, I'm a little bit
Yeah.
tired of things. And I love my wife and my stepson, my teenage stepson.
Yeah.
But it's hard for all of us to be together all the time, and that was the case at least at the beginning of all this. So then I thought of it of an experiment, a personal goal But also I wonder, like, in those moments where I feel like I'm upset and perseverating. Um, if I meditate, will that be that DRA or DRI, or
Yeah.
will that compete with this perseverations, and will my physiology get back to its uh, normal
Homeostasis.
states,
Yeah.
homeostasis, yeah. And so it's not like I'm there, but I'm interested in seeing where this goes. And then also, then I end up wondering too, when it comes to the people that we support, usually with DD, or with some of the behavioral issues that are somewhat severe.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, if we add these repertoires of uh, behavioral relaxation training, and having those kind of like coping skills and meditation skills and all of that, uh, it's not the only answer, but are they essential, necessary to be taught? So I'm playing a little bit with all that. Um, and yeah, I mean, before COVID, I was someone who would travel maybe about 50% of the year. Um, that's kind of my role as a trainer
Yeah.
in crisis management, and we're all over the place. So we would constantly travel to provide these trainings. And now I'm staying more at home, and we I actually, the positive side of all this is that I I, I spent 5 years traveling a lot, and so I did need the break and the quality time with my family,
Mm-hmm.
and so that has been great. But there is always also, as you're deprived of a lot of reinforcers,
Yeah.
then I was, I somewhat obsessed with making the time count, and then all of a sudden I'm doing like brain agility trainings and master classes. Like, I
Yeah.
learned mixology and
Nice.
negotiation
Nice.
strategies, and how to train my puppy, which that's another thing that people do a lot of during this pandemic, which is getting puppies, getting a pet. And so I have, right now, my puppy is 5 months old, and so it has become another challenge to and of mine, another personal goal to train this
Yeah.
puppy. And I have failed terribly. I mean, she's learning skills, but she's still a lot of work. I mean, I have to remind myself she's a puppy, and I'm a behaviorist, but then I need to kind of let like, I can guide her in a direction, but there is some skill building that takes, it builds over time,
Yeah.
and I have to be patient in the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, so I don't know,
Nice.
man. I don't know if I'm
What?
going in all sorts of
No,
directions,
it's all
but
right. It's all right.
yeah,
That's how
that's
I.
all. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
What
that's
breed of
all.
dog?
She's a sheepadoodle, so it's a mix of an old English sheepdog with a poodle.
Okay. Nice.
Well, which is another thing that we want to be really proactive about the house training, because we currently live in an apartment, and actually, we it's hard to admit this, but we had no idea that as a sheepadoodle, like, we didn't do our homework. We just fell in love with the dog when we went
Yeah.
to see when we went to see her. And then in that process, it was too late. We already knew she was coming home when we found out that she was going to be huge. Like,
Yeah.
the old English sheepdog side is going to make her really, really big. And so, like, and now I'm super sensitive to, like, oh man, like, if she jumps, if she pulls when she's walking,
Yeah.
right now it's manageable, but it won't be after some
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So a lot of things where I realized, after all of my history as a behavior analyst, like, there's so much I don't know. Interesting to see too that I could have gone the tag teach route when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to my puppy, but and it's not like I'm close to it. Um, I'd be interested in exploring that too, but, like, because I had the master class subscription,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this training is available. So you have uh, this trainer, I would say, is a behavior analyst, but doesn't use our terms.
yeah, yeah,
But he practices as one. And to me, I find like, okay, there's no conflict here.
yep,
He's using reinforcement, he's using shaping, he's using
yep,
chaining, he's
yep,
really like controlling the environment, he's doing the antecedent manipulations, he's
yeah.
individualizing treatment, uh, and you know, he can navigate all of this nature nurture
Pretty well, huh?
interactions.
Nice.
So I find I actually ended up being more excited about learning from someone who's not a behavior analyst but practices as one.
Yeah, it's
uh,
always
and and
invigorating
yeah,
to find someone like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, he has that, you know, kind of task analysis, or like at least this inventory of skills that are essential to be taught
Mm-hmm.
for puppies, for dogs. And you know, he says in his training something like, and so again, it doesn't really match exactly our terms, but he says that um a dog that has technique is a trained dog, but a dog that
Okay.
has conditioning is a well-trained dog. You know. And so
Nice.
it's funny because he basically, he, if you put that in context, he talks about, you know, the kind of like skill acquisition and the difference with that and fluency, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, actually getting someone to be so responsive so quickly and to have the stimulus control, so that each time that I say down, immediately the dog goes down, and then there are distractors or things competing with following my instruction. She does. uh, you know, I think that, you know, that's it. That's all, you know, at the heart of behavior
Yeah.
analytic interventions. So anyway, a lot of things going on during
Yeah.
during this pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add a little context here that I'll probably keep in, which is just we caught up for like what an hour and a half before this, so there's a lot of personal stuff that personally leaving out on some of the sides of the pandemic affecting just for the sake of keeping it off the internet,
Yeah.
since it's a little more personal. So appreciate it, man. Is there anything else you want to maybe pass along to the BA community or?
Well, you know, like I think right now, you know, in terms of what our society is going through, I think I have to say too that, you know, I'm sensitive to that as well. When it comes to supporting um, the Black community,
Mm-hmm.
I'm right now trying to find my place in supporting the movements,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like I want to put it in the context of this behavior analytic lens to then see how it can be productive to our field as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, in a way, I want to do what they're asking us to do, which is to educate yourself before
Yeah.
you become someone who supports us.
Mm-hmm.
And the information is out there, but then there's so much, right?
Yeah.
So I want to do, you know, I want to do it justice. I'm clearly, you know, I'm an immigrant. I moved to the U.S. As an adult. Like I was already 18 years old. So, you know, I know what it is to experience, you know, microaggressions because of the accent that I will forever have.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say that I also know that I am a person of privilege in that I've always been of a middle class family. I always had what I needed. I
Mm-hmm.
had a good education, and I've had opportunities. Like I really haven't been. I've had privilege in many ways, and maybe the proportion of that relative to how I have felt discriminated against. You know, I don't. Maybe I'm responding in my behavior as someone who is privileged rather than as someone who has been constantly battling
Yeah.
having a space in the world, and people not making so many assumptions about you and mistreating you.
Mm-hmm.
So because I know my privilege, then I know that I have to spend the time being sensitive to the needs of the people who are discriminated against. And
Yeah.
you know, that includes Black people, but then of course, Hispanics, and then
Mm-hmm.
I mean there are so many minorities that right now could use some support.
Yeah.
So I'm sensitive to that. Um, what else? I think as it relates to COVID, it's to me at a macro level, it's also fascinating and very hard to
Mm-hmm.
unpack and understand because of again our training tends to be for most behavior analysts. I know that like if you talk to like an Anthony Bigland or someone like that, they're able to see systems and see things at a macro level. But in our tradition to working and individualizing things, then there is somewhat of a struggle for us to then see how groups behave and some of these cultural things. But
Yeah.
so I know that I don't have enough of a knowledge base to tackle
Yeah.
that, but I think it's necessary. And then, but it's still very interesting for me to see, the division in the country as it relates to many things, COVID being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I still, while my traveling reduced quite a bit, I still have been in a few different states. I live in Florida, but I have been out of state already uh, a couple of times, and then
Yeah.
in locally providing some in-person trainings because of the nature of what we teach.
Mm-hmm.
It can be done online to some degree, but not 100%.
Yeah.
And so all of the protocols and the adaptations to mitigate risk, and then the fact that for the company to stay afloat, we need to keep providing these trainings, and they're needed as people
Yeah.
inevitably are reopening schools and and operating in like residential and treatment centers. And so my experience at airports, um, or in training or just going to a different geographical location has been, I mean, very interesting, overwhelming, and stressful as well. I'm one that I'm not afraid to share my bias as it relates to things, all things COVID. And I'd be one to be on the side of being extra careful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so you'll see me with a mask and a face shield at an airport where, like, when I look around, some people either are not wearing a mask or they're wearing it because they are required to, because they get
Mm-hmm.
prompted by officials to do it.
Yeah.
But I saw a person here and there with some like verbal escape maintain behavior, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have a medical condition, as they were prompted to put the mask on
Yeah.
or to put it all the way on or things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Or, and then, those things, I guess, I'm not one to judge, like, in terms of, like, I know there's a lot of variability in the ways in which we interpret what's going on and what we consider safe or not safe. And I'm not by any means thinking that I am right and other people are wrong. But to see the variability to me is interesting, and
Yep.
and that as it relates to rule governance or
Mm-hmm.
contingency shaped behaviors and macro contingencies and all of that. It just to me it just tells me that if we were those behavior analysts that were the as the field grows and we have this exponential growth of certificates, if all behavior analysts in training contacted training in understanding and intervening as it relates to macro contingencies at a societal level,
Mm-hmm.
man, like we would be everywhere, right?
For
Because
sure.
it's so relevant right now with activism, with this pandemic. In so many ways, like we could be informing those conversations, and there's not a lot of people doing it, and
Yeah, there's
so
not a lot
that
of people
speaks to,
equipped with the tools to be able to do it.
yeah,
It's something I've shared on here. Like that's an area that you don't get direct hands-on experience. Like you start to get it through and um, working in an organization of different sizes, you start to get a taste of kind of cultural contingencies and macro contingencies. But it's hard to get the experience in that sort of level, especially when we're talking about um, something like your ward, your county, your city, your state. Like it starts to get crazy on understanding those relations, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing like before we wrap up, Ryan, that I wanted to mention that it's just another shout out. I think that is very relevant to the conversation we just had because you know we recognize a lot and we kind of like tacked all of the things where we are deficient and things we need to work on as a field. Um, and we can be somewhat unintentionally hypercritical
Yeah, yeah.
of people around us who hold different beliefs and or maybe like we are also being hard on ourselves because of what we don't know, and all I know is that there is a richness in all of the information that's out there, all of the ways that you can learn and grow. um, and so basically, I just wanted to give a shout out to a friend of mine, a colleague. His name is Troy Fry.
Nice.
He's one of the co-authors of the Essential for Living. But he's a person that I absolutely admire because he has been in the field for quite a bit of time, and he's learned so much. And even despite his accomplishments and his how he has established himself in the field, um, he's still a practitioner and he's still out there. Like the source of reinforcement is in actually going consulting, being
Mm-hmm.
hands-on, troubleshooting, supporting people directly. um, and but like anyone, like I admire him, but he is the first person who will be also humble in admitting that we have so much to learn. And so in recent conversations with him, the way we framed that is that we are all in process, right? We're all in process, we're all in progress. If you always look at it that way, then you are always motivated to learn, yet you're not too hard on yourself, right? And not too
Yeah.
hypercritical. And then we kind of find a place because we need that, like Ryan, we were talking off camera too about um, like some of the behavior of behavior analysts and how after contacting so much reinforcement for your verbal behavior, you don't do that kind of self-evaluation as much, right?
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah, it
you,
can be
you kind of,
tricky.
yeah, it can be
It's
tricky. And
slippery
so
slope too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't feel like for example, you're not an example of that, despite the fact that your channels, your platforms have grown and you have um, so much feedback going your way. I think that from the time at Calaba, where you were being introspective and you were overwhelmed and self-evaluating because you
Mm-hmm.
care and your values are to do a good job, it's so hardworking. I see that still, and I don't think that you have lost that humility. Um, but that is not always the case. So like I think that's something that I'm encouraged to always stay in process so that I don't lose sight of remaining humble and self-evaluate without uh, too much judgment on myself, yet to
For sure.
continue to strive to learn more and more,
Yeah.
to be well-rounded.
Same, man.
So
I resonate with that. Super important. Got to continually vibe check yourself. Make sure you're doing all right, right?
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Not
Practice
missing
that.
anything. Don't have any blind spots. Things like that going on.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
for
one of my
sure.
professional fears, man. Is like waking up and realizing like, oh, I had blinders on. Like I was not paying attention. So I like
Hmm.
the way he frames it though. Like keeping in. It's about the process, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Stay in process.
Nice. Well, thank you, man. Appreciate the time catching up.
Yeah, same here. Again, it was a privilege to be part of this, and I hope this resonates with people out there. And thank you for spending the time to catch up, man. It
Oh no,
was
it's
it was
been
much
it's been
needed.
awesome. Yeah, 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 for sure.